Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Can you turn on your little camera?
Yeah, I
Or
can, as a matter of fact. Though it might be
or-
a bit glitchy. Discord has never been reliable for me.
Fair enough, fair enough. If
Howdy.
you go ahead. There you are. Perfect. Hey, how are you?
Doing great. Okay, wait. Let me make sure this is on my
I know
end.
I asked you that like 3 times.
Oh, and I kept saying howdy, so it's fair. There we go. We made it happen. How are you doing?
There.
Introduce yourself to the fine people of my community, please.
Do you want me to do like my whole Khaleesi title or just like my hi, how are you title?
Whatever you think is best.
Okay, fine. I will go ahead and do it. So hello everybody. I am Josie Rose C here on Twitch for fun and entertainment, and talking like variety, politics, and stuff like that. But what I do in my day job is I am the director of the U.S. Trans Survey and special projects for the National Center for Transgender Equality. I also serve on several boards, such as the Transgender American Veterans Association, as well as the Suicide Prevention Resource Center and the Democratic National Committee's Trans Advisory Committee. So I wear a lot of hats. I wear a lot of hats, but I will say I'm currently technically on medical leave. So it doesn't have to be business. It could be whatever you want to chat about. But this is my 6th week out from bottom surgery post-op. So
Yeah,
it's the
congratulations
first
on
time
that.
I've streamed. Yeah, since then. So yeah, thank you.
Well, if in case something happens and you, I don't know, during the course of this conversation, die or explode, just let me know and we can, kindly curtail it. Congratulations on the surgery.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sitting on enough pillows, so I should be good.
Okay, so we start from the very beginning, okay? What is a transgender? Can you help me out with that one? Because a lot of people are asking this.
A lot of people are asking this. Well, apparently, Elon Musk apparently comes out as trans. It's basically
Mhm.
not cis. If you are not cis, and that meaning that you are don't identify as the gender that you were, I guess, the sex that you were assigned at birth. If your gender doesn't align with that, then you are trans, right? And I try to be as simple as that, right? So if you don't identify with the cisgender identity, then you're trans, right? And so that could mean a lot of different things: non-binary, trans woman, trans man, all over the spectrum of how you feel and what you feel in that gender fluidity is trans. So it's pretty easy, I think, to think about it. If you are a cis man or a cis woman and you're not trans, then there you go.
So
But
it's
if you
kind of
feel that,
like
then you're trans.
it's a little bit like being gay, but maybe a bit more.
Yeah. I mean, like if you think about it, okay, so when you think about it like in like
This is one of the complications of bottom surgery. Just give her a minute. Oh wait, that's my internet. Uh,
like for me, like it's easier to just start there. Hello, can you hear me?
Damn. At first I thought it was you who disconnected, and I had so many great jokes lined up, and it took me a couple seconds to
Ah,
realize that things were
darn,
frozen
I
on my.
wish now you can make the jokes on yourself.
Okay, yeah, I will. Okay, so you're frozen for a second, right? And then I'm like, "Don't worry, guys. Known complication of bottom surgery. She'll be right back." And then I realize, I realize my chat's frozen. No one laughed at my joke. That's how I learned. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, my cats ate my modem. I had to get another
There
one.
you go.
All right. Well, here we are again.
That
Hello.
seems typical them. All right, when did I cut out on your side?
Oh shit.
Well,
I made a couple
I
of
guess I could
jokes, so
say.
I kind of blurred out my memory there.
Oh no, but oh yeah, I was just talking about like, just being trans is so much easier than people make it seem to be, right? Like people want to dissect the individual identities under the trans umbrella, but for me it doesn't matter, right? What matters is that people who identify as trans get equal human rights, right?
Yeah.
Because we can dissect the idea of like what it is to be something, but like everybody's idea of another gender is kind of like looking through a porthole, right? Like you can only like see so much of somebody's gender unless you are that gender, right? Like I can even say like, I tried to live as a man for 34 years and I still don't know what it's like to be a man, right? I am much more comfortable and understand being a woman so much easier, so much more fluid in my own self than it is to understand being a man,
Yeah, well, I,
right?
I think the main issue as well is that social descriptors, categorization, social roles, stuff like that, uh, nobody really pays that much attention to them, generally speaking, right? Like all of the ephemeral meanings behind what it really means to say be an American, right? Because
Right.
like what does it mean to be American? Well, you have like the nationality argument, and that one's pretty rote, right? Pretty cut and dry. But then it's like, okay, well, plenty of people have said you're a real American when talking about people who don't have citizenship, right? Has anyone ever sat down and really, like, mathematically worked out where those lines are? No, because it's stupid. And anyone coming at that argument
Yeah.
would know that it's a broad, not necessarily rhetorical, but it's, it's kind of like a collection of associated meanings. And to be hyper specific, I mean, even if something good could come out of that, it would take a lot of time and it would be a huge headache. So I don't think anyone is really equipped to come at questions like that with, a ruler and a protractor. But now everybody is like a deputy sociologist with their own definitions of gender, especially conservatives running in trying to solve all these like epistemic questions or philosophical arguments with like it's as simple as that. Like
Yeah.
can you imagine if somebody was like, I don't know, the American spirit feels to me like if you're independent and if you care about America, and someone runs in and they're like, do you have citizenship? Nope. Okay. And then they just run out. I think most
Yeah.
people would go like, that guy's kind of being a little bit stupid on purpose. But we do
Yeah.
that with gender nonstop.
Yeah, it's like the no true Scotsman's fallacy, right? Where it's like, oh no, that person's not trans. Oh, that person's not this. Oh no, and it's just like this game of like invalidating people's existence. It's like I think it's like and I have a lot of opinions about Republicans and conservatives. I used to be one back in the day. I was born and raised in
Oh,
Texas.
fun.
Like yeah, all of it, right? I was in the Navy for like 6 years as a reactor operator. Like I did all that stuff, and like it really repressed me and gave me a lot, but like I think about like
Couldn't have
how
repressed you that badly if
deranged.
you were in the Navy.
Oh yeah, right. Like,
Sorry.
well, no, it definitely did. Like, definitely did. Believe me, I knew a bunch of gay people, but I did not know any trans people. I did know some that came out afterward, though, that reached out to me, and like, hey, I'm trans. I'm like, oh, so am I. But anyways, I think about like the conservative nature of like I'm going to nitpick at somebody and make fun of them and hope that they don't actually look at me, right? And I don't know what happened to conservative ideology, because I remember when I was a kid and I grew up around a lot of conservatives, I was told don't stare, right, by my parents. Don't stare, don't make fun of people, like all of that type of stuff, and you're like supposed to like let things be, right? But now it's like it's the opposite. It's like no, stare and point and laugh, right? And it's just like, what the hell is going on? And like, it's like becoming a mind virus. Like I have seen like older family members that like were very open and okay with me being trans. But over the last 3 years, they're now becoming like not okay with it. I'm like, what the hell is going on? It's like that conservative mind virus of
Well,
like, oh, maybe this isn't okay.
that's the
And it's
shift
like really frustrating.
that's the shift towards genocidal rhetoric, right? Like a
Yeah.
disapproval of gay and trans people has been present in pretty much all of society forever. But there's a difference between like this passive, oh, whatever, I don't approve kind of attitude, which is, I mean, that's not good. But there is an innate passivity to that message being the primary one. I don't approve. Well, I don't approve isn't the same as I'm going to use every bit of political power I possess to actively destroy you. Which is, and nowadays that's more in line with what we see, where it's gone from, I mean, remember, only like 5 years ago with trans people, the conservative message with being transphobic was like, these people are delusional, they need help, but like we feel for them. Like they're clearly confused, but obviously it was like a fake and paternalistic kind of sympathy, but it was still
Yeah,
pretend sympathy. Whereas now it's full on like, no, these people are literally destroying our society. Anything you can do to harass them is valid.
everything. Yeah, all of it. And I can't remember which creator this was. I feel bad not crediting them. But they just came out with a video recently. But they said like I remember, in the 90s, like, people would say, oh, trans people are a trap. They're going to fool you. They're going to have sex with you. They're going to like assault you and all that type of stuff. Right. But nobody really says that anymore because then they are conceding the fact that trans people can be seen as cis and can fool you.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Because
no,
the
the
whole,
narrative of like the
yeah,
trickster trans woman, it doesn't work well with the idea that like we can always tell, we can always see you. So it's gone now.
exactly.
That's
It is.
yeah, that's actually pretty wild. Not in a good way. It's
Yeah.
not a good kind of
Not
wild.
in a good way.
But it's
No.
sort of interesting how there are like different kinds of transphobia that age in and out based on their usefulness to like the narrative of persecution, and some of them are so outdated that they actively contradict the current narrative, which is probably a lot worse than the ones we've seen before. I can't remember a time,
Yeah.
at least.
It is pretty bad.
Yeah,
Like I remember before, like, okay, so there's like it's like it goes in really heavy mean cycles, right? So if you go back into the 60s and 50s, you're here you'd get your head cracked open for not wearing like clothing that fit your, gender or sex, right? You're supposed to wear like boxers and not bras and things like that. If you're, and people you'd get your head cracked open by the police, you'd be harassed, all of that type of stuff. So there was like an entire like it was just fascistic authoritarian, like you can't even go out the door with something that makes you look trans or genderqueer in any way. And then it kind of like let up a little bit, and then you had like the whole like 80s and the 90s, you had this like boom of like, trans people, but like passing culture was very important because the game was, if I can pass in society, then I'm safe, right? So that's how kind of like trans woman culture was a lot about passing back in the day. And like, no, you got to fix your hair this way or you're going to get caught, or you need to wear this, or you need to wear this piece of jewelry. And it was like, it was about safety. It wasn't about you have to be this to be trans. It was like, you have to wear this like this or you're going to get caught. Right. And like there's like an entire culture around passing and what it meant to pass back then. But as time has progressed, you have a lot of people who came out and were able to live their lives in the early aughts. You have like Caitlyn Jenner coming out, Chaz Bono, and then you start having this like, few people coming out, but it was still like celebrity driven. And it was like, oh, this is still kind of like entertainment, unaccessible type of stuff, even though there were people transitioning the whole time. Now we've gotten to a point where it's like, we need to try to push the genie back in the bottle because like that's where they're at. They're panicking, right? And they're panicking because like just like in the gay panic, right? Like, oh my God, my kids are going to be gay because they know gay people.
I still
It's the
have that gay
same
panic.
thing. I know.
I'm still doing that. I still worry.
Yeah.
I might meet a
Yeah.
gay person one day.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But that's what I'm just saying is like trans people have become this like boogeyman that are going to turn your children into degenerates because they need to have, you got to save the children rhetoric, right? And it's really easy because for some reason, well, not some reason, I think we all know stochastic terrorists and how they all work in one unifying voice is making this drumbeat. And, there's like less people are putting she, her pronouns into their, or he, him pronouns on Zoom windows and chats. Like that all went away. It's like, because I feel like people are just afraid to talk about trans people because it becomes political. And once something becomes political, you're not supposed to talk about it anymore. And at least that's the way it was in my family, right? My family is like, you don't talk about religion or politics, right? And they're really looking at me when they say that always. But like, that's how it worked. But that's how they think, right? Like religion and politics are like equal. Like they're both as sacred, they're both unmutable, they're both unchangeable. And if you go against it, it's blasphemy. And now we have the permission to go against you, even in a family setting, right?
And of course,
And
it's
that's how
always
a lot of
been
conservatives think.
it's always been bullshit as well, because they'll say don't talk politics, but then they will talk politics. Just through the framework of like normativity. We're stuff that
Yeah.
is political. You know, like you can talk about white people but not black people. You can talk about guys but not women. It's like the gamer meme, right? Like, oh, why'd they
Yeah.
make this game
Yeah.
political when a black character came in? All subjects
Yeah.
that are as political as any other, but you know, sort of accepted hegemonically are, or like anything like gas prices, the economy. You know, how do you have a conversation that doesn't get political?
Yeah. I don't
Invariably,
understand it either.
it'll trend towards that in some way or another.
Yeah, and and I think well, I'm a little bit on the spectrum, so it's really hard for me to not talk about politics at some point when something political comes up and I know about, right? Where it's
You
just like,
are a
oh yeah, I
gay.
need to talk about this. Huh?
You are a gay.
What was?
My
Yeah, I
panic
am
has come
gay.
true. Gotcha. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
kept a good chase going for a while.
If the flags couldn't figure it, if you couldn't figure out the flags, I don't know what to tell you.
I just
I
assumed
mean,
you
I
were
even
at
built a gay cloud out of,
cotton candy. Now cotton
yeah.
candy is political. I see. We can truly nothing
Yeah.
is sacred. No,
Nothing is sacred.
I get you. I've never shut up when talking to my family either. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with a progressive family, so I didn't have any issues with these subjects, you know, with them. I do know, however, that when I was in high school, and I think this is probably the case for most people, like shitty transphobic jokes were not only like common, they were like not even thought of, you know. Uh,
Right. And
and
they were in all the classic movies like
they
Ace
were
Ventura.
yeah, and they were all over the place, like in broader culture. But I think like, and this is where that narrative shifts, right? It's because there's a difference between like disapproval and disregard and like active fear mongering. Um, for instance, crime, like criminals. Socially speaking, there's always been a disregard for criminality. Obviously, that's borderline like the definition, you know. But there's a difference between like a haughty, even like a tough on crime liberal Democrat version, like 1990s Bill Clinton attitude towards crime, super predators or whatever. There's a difference between that, which is bad, and this like our cities are crumbling, they are dying, and it's because of crime.
Yeah.
Like the president of the Philippines who was talking about how he wants to execute drug dealers. And Donald Trump said that recently in a speech as well. That's not just like a disapproval of crime or like a social stigmatization. That is this entire other, like, we will orient our politics around
Yeah.
the fear of this group. And they're doing that for pretty much everyone now, right? I mean, short, like openly black people and Jews, feminism, immigration, trans people, and criminality are all being cited as like, yeah, no, these are actually destroying the West, like right now, like we're crumbling, and anything done against these groups is self-defense, definitionally. Kind of the
Yeah.
line now, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And it drives me absolutely bonkers, right? Because they'll talk about crime, but they're the ones starting to commit like the massive wholesale terroristic crimes, like mass shootings. You have, all of like you have the now they're attacking electrical grids, like they're firebombing drag shows, and like one of the things that I always get annoyed about is like, why aren't the liberals going, we need to be tough on crime on these freaking liberal, like these terrorists, these domestic terrorists that self-imposed, like look at the CPAC heading, right? Like it's a proud domestic terrorist. And that's the thing. It's like, why do we not adopt their language? And I think a lot of it is that the right doesn't like being doesn't care about being hypocritical, because I think it's a play of power for them. It's like,
mm,
oh yeah, I am hypocritical because I'm an authoritarian. Now shut up and listen to me.
yeah, and
Like,
I
do as
think
I say, don't
it,
do as I do.
yeah, I agree. If you run far enough down the logic too, you see the attitude from the left, which is like, violence against fascists is self-defense, which is a whole like a wholly reasonable logic. The
Yeah,
problem is like if you twist the descriptives enough, you eventually arrive at prescriptives that feel like they're totally incoherent. But there are probably a lot of people on the far right who legitimately believe that society is crumbling due to X and Y, and like any, all these actions taken are legitimately necessary as part of, and I think that's like kind of in large part a product of the fact that, it's almost a little bit scarier than they don't care about hypocrisy. It's like they don't care about empiricism. Like there's not
yeah,
actually any respect for the idea that there might be like they might be like empirically wrong. Like there might be physical evidence in the real world that just completely invalidates what they're saying. I don't think
absolutely.
that I don't know if they don't think about it or if they don't care. I don't really know, but
I
it's
know,
a problem.
you know how a lot of conservatives love to just like, and you know, you've done the debate circuit. I've done debates, like all that type of stuff, you know, on this stuff. But like, one of my favorite things to do is, you know, they like to talk and they like to express their point altogether, right? They're like, let me finish my point, let me finish my argument. My favorite thing to do with those type of people is like, let's say they have the take of, if we allow trans people to exist, it's going to destroy society, and I'm going to be like, okay, let's grant you the position that society is destroyed. Can you now work backwards? So, like, okay, society is destroyed. How did it happen? Right? Make
Uh,
them like
uh,
come up with a
uh.
scenario exactly,
Well,
and
we
then they can't say
lost
a effing word.
faith in the father, and like it's always some no,
Yeah,
it's
there's.
always like some abstract a concept I think is important became less important, and therefore every system just instantly fell apart.
I
Um,
know, right? You can't even get them to explain like one of the things that, you know, because I ran for Congress in 2020, way back, but right before transition actually, but or pre-transition, and one of the things I would do when somebody would at the door, like, you know, I knocked a lot of doors. When somebody would be like, "How are you going to pay for it?" Like when I say like, you know, Medicare for all or you know, healthcare for all, I would say, "Okay, I will explain how I'm going to pay for it if you can explain to me how we pay for the local fire station." Because at that point, it's like, if you can explain to me the theory of how to freaking tax the actual, you know, city to get a fire station, then you understand the complexity of very heavy tax law and legislation building for you to know how to pay for Medicare
well,
for
they
all,
even
right?
if you gave them the completely correct even if you gave them like the
Exactly.
itemized list, it's not like they would understand because most people don't
Exactly.
understand that. It'd be like you say, "Yeah, hey, let's raise
Yeah.
some money to fund our local fire department." They're like, "Okay, how does the water get to the fire truck?" And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, it's actually kind of complicated. Do we have to? It's like, okay, so there's a substation here that, and
Yeah.
meanwhile they're just like smiling at you because they don't know and they don't care, right? They're just
They don't care,
wasting your
and
time.
so that's what I did, right? I'll be like, they're like, "Well, I don't know that," and I'm like, "Then you're not gonna know the answer if I gave it to you correctly." Right? So it's kind of like, you know, playing their own game against them of like, "Oh, so you're this mega brain, this giga brain person where you can just sit there and like know how all of the outcomes of the world are going to happen from the most minute things. Then explain to me how those things happen. Like, get to the catastrophic scenario for me." Right? Because it's so bonkers because they don't, it's the same thing I do with, you know, forced birthers, right? I'm like, okay, great. Abortion is now murder through the legal definition of murder. Like, how many years do mothers get for having abortions? And they're like, I was like, no, you want to imprison mothers. How many years? Tell me now. You got the magic wand. It's murder. Now, how many years? And their brains explode because they're like, oh, wait, we're supposed to legislate after we get the policy?
Well,
Like,
I mean,
it's
they
so
don't.
frustrating.
They're kind of like conditioned to not understand politics as a cause and effect game. They're supposed to take
Yeah.
like very strong, very unthoughtful, rigid stances on a couple of key political issues with no understanding of what effects any of those would have. The funniest
Right.
thing is that the actual like greatest existential threat to the West, which is climate change, is like literally being like heralded in by the right. They're death cultists who are bringing in
Yeah,
like
they are. Like,
for no reason other than because they're in bed with the oil companies, you know,
yeah,
the climate apocalypse. And then they're
it
screeching
really
about,
is.
I don't know, women peeing in toilets or something. I don't know,
People
peeing while
like
standing up.
me, right? Like, you know, oh my gosh. And we'll talk about other things stupid like, you know, I'll go on Twitter, right? And you'll have somebody like fucking dumbass Deborah So. Oh my God, one of the worst humans. And
Yeah,
so
she's
she'll
pretty
say
dumb.
like, yeah, and she'll put the like, you know, those stupid tweets like, you like, a vagina cannot be created, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, my vagina disagrees. I had like 120 posts from transphobes saying, that's not a vagina. You can't have a vagina. That's not what it is. You're disrespecting vaginas and all this stuff. And I'm like, but if you were probably on another post saying, women can't have penises. And then when you don't have a penis, and it's like, it's so fucking frustrating.
Well,
Like, it's
they don't
like
think
they're
about
just,
it. They can't
They
think
don't think
about it.
about it. They don't think about it.
It's kind of like thinking is a choice, right? Like
Yeah.
you can live your life well with very little thought given to some things, especially if you're kind of like conditioned to act that way. And for them, like these are just things they don't think about. It's one of the reasons Deborah So tweets, or really there are so many conservatives who tweet
Oh,
like this.
yeah.
They tweet
The
like
stupid things
maybe
like that.
about a dozen different things, rephrased however many times is necessary. All of them could be defeated with like two questions. Like if you had them on
Yeah.
call, and this is why when I was talking to Deborah So, she was like a
I
cowering like
remember.
wimp, like who
Yeah.
would make very weak statements and would like walk off anything I questioned her on. It's because it's like NPC behavior basically. Like
It
their
really is.
their dialogue trees are fine in absence of being challenged, but the moment anybody steps to that, they have to walk away. This is one of the reasons why, as the right has gotten more openly hateful in the past couple of years, the debates have really dried up. JP
Yeah.
doesn't do them anymore. Ben Shapiro doesn't. He used to bring more competition onto his show. Tucker Carlson doesn't bring those folks on anymore. Sargon of Akkad
Oh,
stopped doing debates. All these, like the right was big chest people on debating back in 2014 through 18, and they've just dried up now. And I think that's because
yeah.
they understand now that they've embraced anti-empiricism. They've really like shouldn't be talking to people who disagree.
I know. It's wild. It's like it's so bizarre to just see how just like intelligence is no longer respected. It's like anti, like anything you say, like, I'm like, one of the things that's, we'll talk about the survey, right? So US Trans Survey, which was done in 2015, which what it came from the National Trans Discrimination Survey that was done in 2008. Now, it was 2008, we had about 8,000 people. 2015, we had about 28,000 people. And I'll say that with the 2022 survey that just closed, we had over 100,000 people take the survey, which is bonkers huge, right? It's huge. Like we shattered the record by almost 3 times, right? So we still cleaning the data. That's not the final numbers yet, but it's looking really good. But one of the things that when I'm doing this science, right? Because the U.S. Trans Survey is really one of the most respected surveys in the United States when it comes to like getting quantitative data on trans people in the United States. And like it's the largest survey in 2015 was like 28,000 people. But people will say, "Oh, but it was an online survey, so we can't take that for what it says." Or when we get all of these other data points, they're just going to immediately just say, "Oh, this survey was, it was done by trans people for trans people, so therefore all that information is biased." And it's so
Sure.
frustrating because I work in the scientific field, right? And the science of getting 100,000 people randomized across the country, where I can literally do a breakout report for every single state in the United States based on the data that we're collecting, including race demographics, age demographics, and all of this stuff with over 100,000 people across the United States. We are literally going to have basically the data Bible of what it looks like to be trans in the United States. And I guarantee you that these transphobes are just going to be like, "Oh, this data is bunk," even though we went through an institutional review board, even though we went through a major university, even though we securely secure the data and have certificates from the NIH that allows the survey to be 100% anonymous and unsubpoenable, right? Like all of those things exist in this scientific survey, and it's really frustrating because this is going to be the data that basically disproves everything, right? Everything they're saying, from health outcomes after surgery to resilience measurements, like knowing how people have it after they get, gender affirming care, quality of life measurements. We're going to have all of the gender, conversion therapy, sports bills, abortion access. We asked on the survey, and the level of detail and granularity we're getting on the survey, which is essentially the US trans census, we're going to be able to debunk almost every single argument, which has already been debunked, which every argument is already debunkable. But we're going to have this data source that is going to debunk everything. And I'm just curious, right? I'm curious to see what the news media is going to do about it. Like, are these conservatives going to try to attack it? Are they just going to ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist? It's really interesting because, like, the data comes out at the end of this coming year, and I want to like go on Joe Rogan and all of these national, platforms and say, hey, these are the numbers, right? This is what it looks like to be trans in Florida. This is what the discrimination levels look like. This is what's happening in these areas. This is how many young people are actually their gender identities, right? It's not more trans men than it is trans women. It's about the same, right? Like the whole thing, all of it, everything. And I don't know. I don't know. It's just it's really frustrating to
Well,
see the anti-intellectualism.
yeah, well, also the real frustration would be if you actually managed to do any of those things, because they wouldn't care, right? They would
Mm-hmm.
have to find another way around. It is useful to have the data, but it's less useful with time, I think, at least in the current environment that we're in, and with the kinds of people you have to deal with when you're arguing with conservatives. Because, oh God, you probably saw this. Do you remember when Matt Walsh went on Joe Rogan a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
talking about, I don't know, millions and millions of youth are getting on hormone blockers, and Jamie pulled up like it says right here, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
5 are getting on a year or something. And Matt Walsh's immediate response, and this was more telling than his mistake, because I've made mistakes, I've exaggerated numbers
Yeah.
plenty, only human, that's fine.
Yeah.
The immediate response from him was not, oh whoops, or oh my bad that I've been fear mongering about this for years and I was off by like 2 orders of magnitude on the number.
Yeah.
His response was, oh, that'll be a great clip for the media, because
Yeah.
the truth is, he didn't know whether he was right or wrong. He didn't care whether his number was correct or incorrect. He
Yeah.
just thought he wouldn't be called on it because he knows that Joe Rogan's a transphobe and that their audience would be totally receptive to any bullshit that he said. For him, it was purely
Yeah.
an optical thing. He will go right back, and has gone back, to the exact same wrong number that he got called on, because it doesn't make a difference, really. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's really difficult to overcome that empirical wall, but directly challenging people is a big part of it. I mean, that's why Matt Walsh acted that way, right? He expected
Yeah.
that he could just spew bullshit to Joe Rogan, which people do all the time. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
with no challenge. But he got called on something really easy and obvious, and he was clearly flustered by it. And I think that's evidence to the
Yeah.
fact that, yeah, there is value in calling them on things they're empirically wrong on. They might be slippery and they might be anti-empiricist, but they can't admit to being anti-empiricist because that's an optical no-go zone, right? Like you can be anti-empiricist, but they have to convince the people who follow them that they're still facts and logic guys. If they don't do that, I mean, I don't know how many people in this country would openly support somebody admitting that they're wrong. That's a couple steps beyond. That's some
Yeah.
truly wacky behavior that even they have not yet fully sunk to.
Just like
Hopefully.
the Republican congressman in Georgia that lied on his resume.
Oh,
Like
oh,
they don't even admit
Santos, the
it. They don't.
Jewish
Yeah.
guy. Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
Jewish guy.
God, that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
funny. And
Like,
then
oh my gosh.
and
It's so
Marjorie
wild
Taylor
because
Greene
like
was
if
defending him. Yeah.
yeah, it's like it's wild to me. It's like if you were like to apply for a job and you just like straight up lied that you got a degree and your like employment history recently was just all effed up and jacked, it's like you'd get fired. You would absolutely get fired. It's like, yeah, you're an absolute liar. Get out of here. But in the House of Representatives, that goes. It's just like, ugh. It's so
Well,
gross. It's
hey, it goes right
absolutely
along to my
disgusting.
advice to all my audience, which is lie on your resumes. If it can get you up to Congress, then no reason not to. Fuck it, lie about your name. Say you're black when you
I
look
know.
like me. Go for it. Who cares? What are they going to do? Call you on it? What are they going to do? Debate you on that? You're not black. Yeah, prove it. What? Why not? Do I not look
Yeah.
black? You say, looking like me. Yeah,
Yeah.
do it. Who cares?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. But yeah, we're like going back to the US Trans survey, and it's exciting to see this number stuff come out because like we have never seen this before. Like we do not have a sample size of trans people who basically said, "You know what? I'm here and I'm going to talk about my experience here in this area of the country that I live." And like it's it's going to be groundbreaking in a lot of ways, right? Like we're going to know what the mental effects of those transports bills are going to be directly on the states that have been doing it. We are going to know the direct impact on the youth on those medical bans that are being passed in states, right? Like those are the stories and information that we're going to be able to utilize to say, oh, by the way, this is how the percentage of trans people that are like fleeing your state, right? Or planning to flee your state. Maybe that's not a good thing to share, but like that's an economic hit, right? Like you have, and right now currently in the state of Florida, you have school teachers leaving the state because of the Don't Stay Gay bill. You have social workers leaving the state of Texas because they don't want to prosecute trans families. You have medical professionals and surgeons and gender clinicians leaving states where there's banning of affirming care because it's their livelihood, it's what they do. And like it's really frustrating because when you talk about protecting children, removing social workers, getting rid of teachers and doctors that treat children is definitely not a way to protect children and increase children's quality of life. And that's essentially what the Republicans are doing. They're making their states even more devoid of access to support networks for their own children that live in their states. Like, it's diabolical. It's
No,
absolutely
it
diabolical.
fully is. If ever there was any good news, and what you've said now, with like teachers leaving the state, for example, is that one benefit I think to the sort of demographic shift that we have between liberals and conservatives is that, I mean, no state in America can function without either group if you were to like, finger snap half of them out of existence. But speaking frankly, liberals occupy uh, most of the positions of managerial power in like pretty much every major city of the country. Education and proximity to minorities tends to correspond to liberal values. If a state is made intolerable to even mildly left-leaning people, the downstream effects of that would make everybody's life a lot worse. It's way, way, way more difficult now to do this like autocratic, authoritarian, fascism, persecution of minorities thing than it was, say, in the Weimar Republic. Because in terms of like the stratification of people by their political affiliation or their ethnicity, that didn't have anything on what we're doing today. Everything is so interconnected that even slight shifts towards the right cause these like knockdown effects that fuck over an entire like everyone. Like
Everyone.
Texas might be red, Houston isn't, Austin isn't.
Right.
The farthest example of this is California. California has more conservative voters than any other state in the union. It's just it has
Yeah.
so many massive cities that the liberal voters outnumber them,
The
overwhelm them.
coastal.
But there
Yeah.
are literally like 32 million conservatives or so, like a huge number in California, like a
Yeah.
massive number, but blue cities. And it's always
Blue
the
cities.
cities, right?
It really is in the coastal areas. And, and one of the things that's what makes me laugh is like when you talk about like electoral colleges, like conservatives should be the ones screaming to get rid of the electoral college because that means that a California Republican's vote actually counts. Right. And like there's a lot of votes there. And they could actually make an election more aggressive, but they want to keep gaming the system in very slight little ways, right? Because they know they can't win a popular vote. In reality, they really can't.
Well, yeah. My hope is that
But
things are skewing further with time. The independents in this
I
country
think
have
you're
always
right.
been more the big kicker. I mean, the really big positive, right? Is that every time, even in red states, that a referendum is held, the results are blue. Like Kansas
Yeah.
on the constitutional amendment for allowing the ban of abortion, somehow in the state of Kansas, about as red as you can get, 67% not in favor of the amendment. They're keeping
Right.
the right to have an abortion. In Florida, Ron DeSantisville pushed for the reinstatement of felons' right to vote and for a higher minimum wage, even
Yeah.
if the Republicans fuck that over. It seems like, honestly, if you separate the politics from the parties, America is Democrat aligned. It's just a matter of
Absolutely.
appealing to them in the right way.
And one of the things that I was predicting before the election was kind of seeing the dust settle from one of my little theories that I had, which is we saw like in 2020 to like 20, or sorry, from 2020 to 2022, this last election cycle, we saw a massive upturning of how the United States is like run. Like you have more people working remotely than ever before. You have mass migrations of people leaving from places that had higher cost of living to lower cost of living. So a lot of places that were purple started turning bluer because people from like New York and California were moving out of the state, moving back home. You also had the fact that being Republican is a, comorbidity for COVID, right? Like because you're more likely to be unvaccinated as a conservative, so therefore you're more likely to die from COVID. So you have older people across the country who are predominantly Republican getting knocked over from COVID permanently, right? And then you also have the redistricting in different states and different places. So you essentially and the youth turnout, right? You have another 2 years worth of youth voters that are really charged up to vote, the Gen Z. And those factors really are, I think, my personally, the factors that prevented the red wave, right? Because we had no consultant, no political consultant, no political pollster knows how to calculate for all those variables that I just said, right? Because young people are new voters, and a lot of consultants don't talk to new voters. A lot of consultants don't talk to people who aren't registered to vote. A lot of voters talk to people who have moved, thinking that they still live there because the voter registration hasn't been updated. So you had this massive issue where the demographic shifts were so large, so much so that the voter databases that the campaigns were using were out of date, so they had no clue who their voters were and who and how many people were there. So that is what I believe happened. And I believe this next election is even going to go further that way because another 2 years of young people are going to be voting. Right. So older people are going to be dying. And I think what's happening is there is just a numbers versus numbers shift. And you know how you see the memes of like non-voters and voters. If more non-voters became voters, then we would be way ahead. Well, I think what's happened is a lot of those non-voters have become voters, and now they know how to vote. Like it's been said by Republicans recently that they can't win special elections anymore because Democrats now vote for special elections. 10 years ago, Democrats were known to never vote for special elections, and Republicans used to game the system to ensure special elections. You saw what happened in California recently where Gavin Newsom raffle stomped the recall election, right? Like before, that's how Republicans used to win governorships of blue
Yeah, there
states.
was some real
So,
concern over that
mhm,
beforehand. I mean, the consistent
mhm.
issue that you find with Republicans voting and Democrats not is that Republicans are, every single one of them, with no exceptions, old white people who live in suburbs, who pay attention to black teens walking around outside, local elections, and very little else. Whereas the hip and happen Democrat crew, they don't care about anything outside the presidential, and even then, just barely. Hopefully, that's shifting more and more. There are so many
Yeah.
local races that Democrats could be winning. Like, probably, I like if you took the proportion of voters who participated in the presidential in 2020 and applied that with local proportions to every local race held in the country, there
Oh
would be
gosh.
literally thousands of local races, governorships, state senate and Congress, mayorships, just falling like dominoes. The
Yeah.
that map they keep pulling out about how the whole country is red, and all the rural areas, and then the cities are blue, that would turn around too. There are a bunch of
Right.
areas that are even like not even urban, like at all, like relatively rural areas would suddenly have local Democratic representation. And it's just because Democrats are too busy smoking pot and fucking each other, like cool people,
Yeah.
to do like local election, involvement. Whereas the Republicans are nerds who don't fuck or smoke pot, so they do care and pay attention.
They are only just getting angrier and angrier bomb shelters, just like looking at the world change before their eyes.
Yeah, doom scrolling
It,
through Twitter, like keeping an update on literally everything, on every group of people they hate, every minority they
yeah.
dislike.
everybody regroup as we grow and grow. And I do have hope, but I also have a lot. Like I always say, I'm a cynical optimist, right? Because I know that the system is hard to change and probably can't. However, I am optimistic enough to know if we actually did what you said, like if we all just voted down ticket and we all knew which ones were the Democrats or which ones were the ones that were actually going to fight for like social justice and like socialistic principles, then we could get there, right? And it really is that simple. And I've been a campaigner most of my life, since for over the last, I guess, 12 years now. And one of the things that I always say is elections are simple, but not easy. Because at the end of the day, the simplicity is just getting the ballot in the ballot box, right? But the obstacle, and you know this because you were very engaged, and I try to get people onto your server, by the way. I hope I
Oh,
got some
thank
people.
you. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
speaking of,
absolutely.
sorry for completely forgetting to advertise your survey to my audience, by the way.
I know, I know. That's when I knew. Does does Vaush really love trans people? Like.
Oh no, I'm
Just
extremely
kidding.
transphobic, but I
Just
did
kidding.
forget that sincerely. Yeah, no, I even had it open my tabs a couple of times. I just kept forgetting to get back to it. Well, either way, there's always next year.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be next year. We do it every 5 to 7 years.
Oh, okay,
It
I'll
takes a
probably be
massive
alive by
amount of
then.
resources. Yeah, it's like you're talking about millions of dollars in resources that have to be spent to do like a national level, like targeted survey, right? Like it's like all the trans people, like how many people were like legitimately worried about like, are you going to share my information with the government? Like I don't want to even share my zip code for the unique ID. Like there was like people who were like that, and I get it. I understand. And so that's why we were so happy when we got over 100,000 people, because it's like, wow, there was 100,000 people who trusted that we knew what we were doing to keep all that data super, super secure. So now, and also keeping everything super anonymous according to the, Institutional Review Board, to have that happen. And, a lot of people were worried about security concerns. And that's completely valid. It's just like, yeah, completely anonymous.
It's a reasonable proportion of the total number of trans people in the country, right? Too. It's like
Yeah.
that's got to be at least like 2% to 5. I don't know the actual math. It's like it's a good number. It's a lot of people.
It's a good number. And you know what's really cool about it too is that the numbers trended to be very in line with the population percentages of the states of the United States. So we want to benchmark off the US Census, right? So we took, like, if you take all of the states and the populations of the states, the US Trans Survey, as far as trans people, it almost correlates like right across the line of like, okay, like, this many people in California, California's first, right? Like, Texas, and then all the bigger population states, and then it just goes down the line pretty uniformly. So we do feel that the uniformity of like the randomness of the survey is going to yield very, very strong, reliable quantitative data that we can say, okay, this is the percentage of trans people. And then we can even go even more granular for the state, or even the state or race, or like we're also thinking about also adding we are going to be adding a 17 to 18-year-old breakout report, as well as a 55 to 64 and a 65 plus breakout report. And we're also possibly doing a breakout report on people who served in the military, which was about 4% of the respondents as well.
Also a
Because I'm a
significant
veteran
percent.
myself. So we even had 30, or about 3% of the survey actually are immigrants too. Right. So we're going to be able to have a huge proportion and actually have data on what it looks like to be a trans immigrant in the United States. So like there's a lot of groundbreaking data that we, in 2015, I wasn't part of it last time, I wasn't even out yet, but in 2015 a lot of the researchers were like wishing they had your numbers so they could have better outcomes as far as like conclusions to go off of. But now we have some pretty solid conclusive data of like, okay, this is what it looks like to be Black in the United States as a trans woman, and it's rough, right? It's not great.
Oh, I thought it was easy.
Oh yeah, it's super easy. It's the easy mode of life, right?
Well,
Yeah.
probably no better a time than this to get all this information in, considering the state of things.
Oh
When will all
yes.
this information be published and publicly accessible?
So I set a goal for the end of next year. Hopefully we'll get it out a little sooner. I am working with the researcher to get some top line data out. So like, let's see some of the big stuff, like how many trans people need access to abortion care, right? Because we don't know that, right? So we need to get that number out as soon as we can. We need to see what the resilience number is, like, people who get gender affirming care, what's the percentage of people say their life is significantly better since they've come out as trans, right? Like, I think those numbers are going to be coming out sooner. But the data, because it's over 100,000 data points,
Right.
takes a long time from our researchers to clean up, analyze. You gotta clean the data, right? You gotta take out all the logical responses, any duplicates, any bots. We got to take out all of those responses, right, that exist. We have to make sure that when we actually benchmark the survey to like the U.S. Trans Census, or the different surveys that exist in the United States, to say, okay, this is what the suicide rate for cis people versus trans people are, right? Like they benchmark that every month, right, in the United States with different surveys. So we're going to be able to benchmark it as well. So there's a lot of math that happens, and a lot of really smart statisticians that are now going to take the data, package it up, make sure it's really easy and accessible, so then we can write a report. Right. And the scientists will write the report. I'm listed as an author, so that's really exciting for me. I know it's like, oh wow. So I get that. People are gonna cite me as Caballero on their research papers, which I love. But I'm really, really hoping for I'm like like right when I get back from work, I'm hiring like 15 researchers, just so we can get the data out as soon as possible. Because I mean, our lives are riding on this data, right? Like, and it's kind of like, it's exposed to the say, but like, if we can shut down one piece of legislation because of the data that comes out of the survey, then that's a win, right? And that's why we got to get it in the hands of as many people as possible. Also, like if you're like a small nonprofit that works with trans people, you can actually like use it as evidence for a grant. Or if you're a researcher trying to get a PhD, right, you can use the US Trans Survey for further questions for your own surveys to ask deeper questions about different things, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's a
one of the things.
foundation upon which you build a bunch of other stuff. It continues to have an effect for a long time.
Yes, it's a huge foundational thing, right? Because people will benchmark off the US Trans Survey for a long, right, like it's the national, like the US Trans Survey in 2015 is the actual survey of record for the National Institute of Health, right? So it's a really big deal to be kind of like the benchmark, so people can ask those questions, right? Like for example, over 50% of the people who took the US Trans Survey actually identified as non-binary, right? So there's a lot of questions to be asked there, right? And there's a lot of research to be done on the way non-binary identities show up, as well as what is the difference between a non-binary identity and social outcomes versus a trans binary identity, right? And being able to make those comparisons, right? Other researchers can use that data to say, okay, this is what the comparative numbers look like, and this is the questions we're going to ask, and then boom, they get PhDs, right? So that's kind of the way that science works. Like you said, it just builds off itself. And that's what we're hoping the U.S. Trans Survey does, because people still cite the U.S. Trans Survey from 2015 to this day. Every day, it's cited.
Which is crazy because
Um,
trans people didn't even exist back then. They hadn't been
right.
invented yet. They preempted it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 2015. What are
I'm looking forward at the
it's
very
wild.
least to the
Yeah.
you said the data on like people who report positive outcomes following their transition might come out earlier than the other stuff. I look forward to that because it seems like every week we get some new addition to the here's a conservative study showing that actually all trans people were sad after they transitioned, and you look at the study and it's like some
I
guy's
think you
blog
cut out
post.
on my end.
Uh-oh.
You cut out for like 5 seconds. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, just that
Now it's my fault.
conservatives are always using, wacko blog posts to support the idea that transitioning makes people sad. So having a gigantic
Oh,
data survey or like a database to to argue actually no, 97 point whatever percent like so and so is going to be a huge help with such a large
Oh,
sample size as
yeah.
well.
And we're also gonna know how many young people are actually getting surgery, right? Like, like we're gonna have higher 16 to 17-year-olds, and so we're gonna be able to look at that 16 and 17-year-old data. That's why we're doing an individual breakout report to show like not even 5% are getting any type of surgery, right? Like, like it's just like what the heck is going on? And I think that's going to be really, really helpful as well, debunking like, oh yeah, this isn't actually happening. Here's in a sample size of several, like close to well over 10,000 folks that we were able to sample across the country, and you're able to see how many people actually got the care that they needed, how many people got puberty blockers, and all of that type of stuff.
When you're off medical leave, what do you get back to? What work are you jumping into the data analysis, or is that being left to other people?
Oh, hold on. Sorry.
Oh.
Say, am I jumping to what?
When you get off medical leave, are you jumping back into data analysis? Are you going to be processing all that, or
Say,
or is that another group of people?
okay, sorry. I'm so sorry. For some reason, you keep cutting
Uh-oh.
out, and I don't know why. I'm gonna pause my Spotify. Maybe that's what it is. Okay. All right. Say that again. I think you're good.
All right, we're gonna try third time's the charm. When you're
Okay,
off
stop.
medical leave,
Now you're good.
okay,
Yes, when I'm
when
off
you're
medical.
off medical leave, are you jumping back into data analysis, or what work remains for you when you head back?
So I am going to be jumping to supervising the project because I am the director of the survey. So that's not going to change. So I will be supervising the analytics that is going to be happening. But I also have principal investigators who do the research and have been with the project from the beginning that actually were involved in writing the report last time. So they're going to be the ones that are kind of checking the math and making sure everything looks good on the scientific side. And then from there, I'm going to be working on getting everything packaged up. So I'm going to be working with different political groups across the United States, from trans led organizations as well as local community orgs, to try to make sure that the data that they want is being listed. I think that's something that a lot of researchers do a lot of times, is that they forget to like talk to the communities before they publish the reports, to make sure like, hey, by the way, like, did we address the things that you really want to see in the reports? So there's going to be a process where I'm going to be setting up systems to communicate with a lot of different community groups across the country, as well as national groups, to make sure that the reports look good. And then from there, I'm like involved in design, website, stuff like that. But I'm also going to be focusing a lot on the National Center for Transgender Equality Action Fund, which is the political arm of the center, and I'm going to be directing and working on that. So that's why I'm so like political with like, the DNC, as well as, Emerge, which is another political organization, to basically build the trans election candidates, and making sure that they're ready to get elected across the country. We already got several, but we need a lot more. So basically running, I guess, a pack, if that makes sense. It's not a pack. It's a nonprofit action fund. But I'm going to be building up the funding and finance for that. So maybe we can do a charity stream and give political donations to the action fund. Just plugging that out.
Yeah, a charity stream for trans people though. I don't know. I'd have to think
Yeah,
about it.
that might not be your style.
Yeah, I've got a hard reputation going as a transphobe. I don't know if I want to break that. I'll give it serious consideration. Maybe if I'm very mean the entire time. Um,
Yeah, maybe. You
I
get to be mean to the chatters to make sure they donate so we
as
can
I
get
often am.
trans candidates.
It,
Yeah, exactly.
I really am happy the survey went well, even though I forgot to mention it to my audience. 100,000 people is the largest data set that has ever been collected of trans people ever, as far as I'm aware, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. Times 3.
Yeah, so by a huge margin. So I'm sure I'll become intimately familiar with every data point on that set as I use it in the years to come to argue with people online. That'll be
Oh,
lots of
yes.
fun. Thanks for building
Yes.
the foundation of several years of my of my debate rhetoric. It's very kind of you.
Yes, absolutely. I'll be happy to do it, and when the data comes out, I'll be talk about some of the highlights of the data, with your audience, because I think, like I said, a lot of this stuff is groundbreaking. Okay, you want all right, so this one's special for you and your audience. Okay, so one of the data points that I was keeping track of before I went into surgery, so I haven't seen the new number yet, but we were already well over 80,000 before I went into surgery. um Only 4% of the population identified as straight.
God damn. That
That
gay but more really is the truth, isn't it?
It's really interesting, right? So I don't know what the exact number is gonna be, so don't take that to the bank or anything. But yeah, like I thought that was really interesting. And the reason I think that's interesting, and I think the reason I think you and your audience would enjoy that is because a lot of transphobes talk about, oh, these poor trans people could just be gay people and be good with it, right? But in reality, it's like, no, we're not transitioning to be straight, right? Like most of us are transitioning and staying pretty effing gay. And I think that's pretty interesting. The fact that a lot of transphobes just think that, oh, if you were just you should have just been a gay man. Why did you become a woman? And it's like, because I like girls. Like I a lot.
Yeah,
Definitely that. So, you know,
yeah, my
that's
experience with the
interesting.
transgenders is that there are a lot of homosexuals in the midst. You have to be careful, you know? That's why they say, you know, you got to be careful about your kids. You got to do a whole trans panic because a lot of them are gay too. It's a double threat. When the data comes out, I would be happy to have you on to discuss it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, we
No,
can talk over the data points. I mean, like I said, literally, it's the foundation of the arguments I'll be having for years. So I might as well learn what they are.
Yeah, might as well. I'll give you, I'll give you the lesson of what's going on in the United States. And like I just love the fact that you're going to be able to dig into the data as well of like what individual states are going through, right? You can do that right now on ustranssurvey.org and look at the reports from 2015. We didn't get all the states last time because we didn't get a large enough sample size. This time we did, and we're possibly getting enough to do a Puerto Rico one too. I'm crossing my fingers for that. So that will be really good to be able to like actually just do a compare and contrast of what it looks like to be like a trans person in California versus like a trans person in Florida. I think we all know what that looks like, but having hard data to see, it's like, you're 10% more likely to be harassed on the street being in Florida versus California is a pretty stark difference, right? I'm not saying that's what the numbers are because we don't know them yet, but I'm just saying those are some of the things that we could see
Yeah. Well,
in our data.
we'll cut right into
Yeah.
it.
Well,
Um,
absolutely. Well, it was great
no,
being here.
it's been a pleasure having you on. I'm sorry about the habitual tech issues. I don't normally have big internet dropouts like that, but I guess it has to happen exclusively when I talk to other people, you know, to maximize the
Yeah,
inconvenience.
yeah, I know. Okay, so you're the one dropping off.
Okay, no. I dropped off once. Everything apart from that had to have been from your end. But I accept
Fine.
responsibility for the one and no more.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And if you're ever in the DC area, make sure you hang out.
Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Are you ever in the DC area?
The last time I went to DC, it was to debate Tim Pool. So the next time he wants
Oh.
Charlie Kirk to get rocked over there, I'll make it known.
Yeah, make it known, make it known. But it was a
Oh
pleasure
no,
speaking with you.
that's right.
Yes.
I was there for Jan 6. That's right. I stormed the Capitol building.
Sorry. Hold on. Hold on. Say it again.
Nothing. Never mind.
No, why
Uh,
is it not coming through? Now you are.
I,
I'm so
I,
sorry.
I said
I'm so
I
sorry.
said I was there for Jan 6. No, I was kidding. I was kidding. It's been a delight to speak to you.
Yeah, it's been an absolute delight, and I'm always available if you ever want about some trans stuff. It's one of those things. It's like one of the things that I do, and it's what I take a lot of joy in. Hell, I was even at the what was it? The Respect for Marriage Act signing recently as well. I was sitting on the White House lawn while they did it. Like,
Dope.
so it was cool. So yeah, I'm always available to chat whenever you need me.
Nice. Well, good to know you also respect marriage. Have a wonderful day, or night,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah,
I'll talk to you
it's
again.
definitely night, and then I'm gonna go and get into dilator I have to do, not fun stuff.
Have fun. Good
But
luck.
yeah,
Have plenty
yeah,
of
yeah,
pillows.
and Yeah, absolutely. And you can always follow me at Josie Rose with the letter C. You can follow me on Twitch, and I'm going to be streaming a lot more because now I don't have to work on trying to get the survey out because I was like really hard to get a hold of
Take
for
some
a
time
minute
to
there.
relax. And yeah, we have it linked in chat. Don't worry. You take care, okay?
Awesome. You're awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
They say bye. Goodbye.
See ya.